Yeah, I'm sure you're probably very surprised with my cooperation, too.
I've been doing this a long time, and
Not really.
you never know. Fast forward just a little bit, and I know you'll tell me these are being completely cooperative. I know you went to the Home Depot in Port Richey, and you bought the tarps and the rope.
Oh, yeah.
And what
Yeah,
would
that was basically to put their bodies in, tie up, and, put in the backyard or the front
where
yard.
you were digging the trench?
Yeah.
Okay. What day did you start digging the trench? If you killed them on the 15th and 16th, what day do you think it was you started digging the trench?
I would say a week later.
A week later?
Yeah. I'll definitely say a week later.
So you're staying in the house with them deceased and with your kids from the 15th and 16th until approximately a week later, and I'm assuming it's got to start smelling by then?
Well, yeah, I bought it to help with the smell, too. Incense was always going on. I had those Febreze things. I had, carpet. Kids were no longer sleeping in their room. They were, sleeping out there.
On those little love seats?
Yeah. There was another couch, too, that dark brown couch that they would sleep on, too.
Okay.
But, yeah, they couldn't get buried. I couldn't move Rich.
So you start digging the trench. I mean, you made a lot of progress on that trench.
Yeah.
I mean, how many hours do you think you worked on that? Because that's a lot of work.
It only took me 2 hours.
2 hours to dig that, and it's the shovel.
That was me being paranoid.
That was you on adrenaline and bang, and I got to get this done. I got to get these people buried, and I got to get out of here.
No, that was me going these people are definitely going to get sketched out here pretty soon by me digging this hole.
Right.
So I would go out and dig it.
This is the story of Shelby Nealy, a man who brutally murdered an entire family to protect his darkest secrets. Imagine waking up one day trapped in a life you can't escape. A man with a twisted sense of justification, an ex-husband and son-in-law who, nearly a year apart, took the lives of 4 people he once claimed to love. What could drive someone to murder their own family? To take not just one life, but the lives of 3 innocent people, followed by an ex-wife who still haunted his past? This is a story that starts with betrayal, a vicious killing spree, and a man's desperate attempt to cover his tracks. But the question remains, what really happened behind closed doors in the quiet town of Tarpon Springs? Shelby Nealy, once a husband and father, found himself at the center of a chilling crime scene. His ex-wife, Jamie Avancic, and 3 of her family members, her brother Nicholas, her mother Laura, and her father Richard, were killed in cold blood. What seemed like a tragedy tied to family turmoil soon unraveled into a nightmare of horror. Nearly a year later, Shelby Nealy confessed to the murders, laying bare the psychological struggles and twisted reasoning behind his actions. This story isn't just about bloodshed, it's about the terrifying unraveling of a man pushed to the edge. What led him to murder the people who had been so close to him? What darkness brewed beneath the surface that made these acts seem justified in his mind? In this documentary, we will take a deep dive into the events leading up to the murders, the psychological factors at play, and the chilling confessions that followed. We'll explore the devastating impact on the victims' families, the investigation that uncovered the truth, and the haunting aftermath that left many questions still lingering. Shelby Nealy's actions raise uncomfortable questions. Could he have been a victim of his circumstances, or is this simply the story of a cold-blooded killer? We'll examine his reasoning, his confession, and the legal proceedings that have followed this shocking case. Through every twist and turn of this tragic tale, we'll uncover the terrifying truth, the emotional trauma, and the chilling decisions made by a man who, despite his own acknowledgement of guilt, felt no remorse for the pain he caused. What drove Shelby Nealy to murder the Avancic family? And most chilling of all, could this horrifying act have been avoided? It was a family like so many others. On the surface it seemed normal. Yet behind closed doors, cracks were starting to appear. A father, Richard Avancic, a mother, Laura Avancic, and their children, Jamie and Nicholas, had lived together in harmony for years. But how well do we really know those closest to us? How much do we see beneath the surface when things start to fall apart? For years, the Avancic family had experienced their share of everyday ups and downs. But there was something about this family that was different. Something that only revealed itself when the unthinkable happened. What started as a simple disagreement, as it so often does, soon transformed into a tragedy that no one could have ever predicted. And it all revolved around one man, Shelby Nealy. Richard and Laura Avancic were a married couple with 2 children, Jamie and Nicholas. They lived in Tarpon Springs, a small town where nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Richard, a man who worked hard for his family, and Laura, a loving mother, spent most of their days navigating the highs and lows of life. They were a family that many might have called stable, content with their lives. Their daughter Jamie, the youngest of the two children, had been married to Shelby Nealy for several years. From the outside, it appeared as though everything was fine. Shelby seemed to fit in, at least at first. He was part of the family. He shared holidays, birthdays, and family dinners with them. He was welcomed into their home, and by all accounts, his presence seemed like a natural addition. But something darker was beginning to creep into the folds of their lives. Behind the smiles, behind the photos, behind the laughter, tensions were growing. And then there was Nicholas, Jamie's brother. Someone who, like his parents, seemed to love his sister dearly. There was no indication that their family was on the edge of a devastating collapse. But in the months leading up to the murders, subtle signs began to appear that would only become clear after the dust had settled. Shelby Nealy wasn't always the monster he would later become. In the beginning, he was a man who had wed Jamie Evancic and entered her family with open arms. He interacted with Jamie's parents, Richard and Laura, and made a living for himself as any other man would, attempting to build a life with his wife. But as time passed, cracks began to appear in their marriage. Whether it was jealousy, control, or resentment, something began to shift. What started as a rough patch between husband and wife soon became something far more dangerous. The tension between Shelby and Jamie was something her family couldn't ignore. Richard Evancic, Jamie's father, tried to be a protector, an advocate for his daughter's well-being, but there was only so much he could do. Behind the scenes, Jamie's relationship with Shelby began to deteriorate. What was once an exchange of words and frustrations grew into something more dangerous. The man who had been welcomed with open arms began to show a darker side. The family, once united, was divided as they found themselves questioning whether they could trust the man they had once embraced. Could they have seen the warning signs? Could they have known that Shelby Nealy would go from a seemingly harmless husband to a man capable of unspeakable violence? As the family's dynamics began to unravel, the questions they asked themselves weren't just about the marriage between Shelby and Jamie, they were about whether this man, whom they had once considered part of the family, could ever truly be trusted again. In the quiet suburb of Port Richey, Florida, a young mother named Jamie Evancic was last seen in January 2018. At 21 years old, Jamie was known for her bright smile and dedication to her two children. Her sudden absence raised questions, but those close to her received text messages and photos, seemingly assuring them of her well-being. Unknown to them, these communications were not from Jamie herself. Her husband, Shelby Nealy, had taken her life and assumed her digital identity, weaving a web of deception that would unravel in the most tragic way. In January 2018, Nealy murdered Jamie and buried her body in the yard of their shared home. To maintain the illusion that she was still alive, he used her phone to send messages and photos to her family, keeping them unsuspecting of the grim reality. As months passed, Jamie's family grew increasingly concerned due to the lack of direct contact. Their suspicions deepened, leading them to question Nealy's inconsistent explanations. This case serves as a chilling reminder of the lengths to which some individuals will go to conceal their crimes, and the devastating impact on the families left behind. Imagine a family once united by love, now at the mercy of an unimaginable betrayal. In December 2018, the Evancic family was about to face a devastating loss, one that would forever alter their lives. Richard and Laura Evancic, parents to Jamie and their son Nicholas, were about to become victims in a grisly chain of events orchestrated by a man they had once trusted. Behind the smiles and family gatherings, Shelby Nealy had been carefully laying the groundwork for a series of murders that would send shockwaves through the community. At the time, Richard and Laura had been grieving the sudden disappearance of their daughter, Jamie, still uncertain about what had happened to her. But they never could have imagined that the person they had trusted the most, their daughter's estranged husband, would be the one to bring them unimaginable pain. The year had passed, and with it, the painful mystery of Jamie's vanishing remained unsolved. Shelby Nealy had managed to convince the Evancic family that Jamie was still alive, sending texts and photos that seemed to assure them of her safety. But as 2018 came to a close, the truth was about to be exposed, too late for the Evancic family to escape the horrors that awaited them. Nealy's motivations for this horrifying double murder were deeply rooted in his own twisted desires. Behind the facade of a grieving husband, Nealy had grown frustrated by the situation he found himself in. With his ex-wife Jamie gone, he had to go to extreme lengths to cover up his crime. But it wasn't just the murder of his wife that weighed on him. Nealy's plans had grown darker as he turned his sights on Jamie's parents and brother. The Ivansics were close-knit, fiercely protective of their children. Richard and Laura, parents who had already suffered the loss of their daughter, were now targeted by Nealy. He had a plan in mind, one that would ensure there were no loose ends. His first act in executing this horrifying plan came in December 2018. Nealy knew he had to act quickly before the Ivansics could connect him to Jamie's death. The opportunity arose when he convinced the family to meet him in their Tarpon Springs home, pretending to deliver a message about Jamie's well-being. But when Richard, Laura, and Nicholas welcomed him into their home, they had no idea that this visit would be their last. Nealy's actions that night were premeditated, chilling in their execution. He had no intention of leaving that house without completing his grim task. Nealy turned the very home that once offered sanctuary into a crime scene. The quiet house, decorated with family photos and warm memories, became the backdrop to a brutal and senseless killing spree. With cold calculation, Nealy murdered Richard, Laura, and Nicholas Ivansic, leaving their bodies in a scene of unimaginable violence. The details of their deaths are too horrific to fully comprehend, each life taken in the most brutal manner. The family members who had tried to protect Jamie, who had tried to understand what had happened to her, were now silenced by the very man they had believed was part of their family. Once the murders were complete, Nealy didn't pause to reflect on his actions. Instead, he immediately began to cover his tracks, putting into motion an elaborate plan to evade capture. He fled the scene in a hurry, leaving the bodies of his victims behind. But it wasn't just the crime scene that Nealy had to worry about. He needed to escape and disappear before the authorities could catch wind of his involvement. Nealy made his way to Ohio, where he hoped to start over, leaving behind the devastation he had caused. He attempted to slip under the radar, to live in the shadows of a past that was catching up with him. He would go on to live in Ohio for months, hiding from the law, as detectives tirelessly worked to uncover the truth. But Nealy's plan was flawed, and the pursuit of justice would eventually lead investigators back to him. As Nealy fled, the Ivansic family's loss was felt by the community, but the search for answers only intensified. The brutal triple homicide seemed like a senseless act of violence, but behind it lay the truth that no one could yet see: this was no random attack. The loss of Richard, Laura, and Nicholas Ivansic was just another step in a series of violent actions taken by a man who had no remorse, no compassion for those he hurt. Shelby Nealy's mind had been warped, and in his pursuit of control and power, he left destruction in his wake. For months there was no closure. The Ivansic family had already been shattered by Jamie's disappearance, and now their final moments had been taken from them in the most violent way. Their story was far from over, but the pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place, even as Nealy tried to vanish into the distance. Little did he know, the truth was already catching up to him, and it was only a matter of time before the authorities would close in on him. The darkness he had created was about to come to light. In the quiet community of Tarpon Springs, Florida, the dawn of 2019 brought with it a discovery that would shatter the town's tranquility. On New Year's Day, authorities were called to a modest home where they encountered a scene of unimaginable horror: the lifeless bodies of Richard Ivansic, 71, his wife Laura, 59, their son Nicholas, 25, and their three beloved Bichon Frise mixed dogs. The brutality of the crime left investigators and residents alike grappling with a single haunting question: who could commit such an atrocity? As detectives meticulously combed through the evidence, a troubling realization emerged. The Ivansic family's daughter, Jamie, had been conspicuously absent. Attempts to reach her had been met with silence, save for sporadic text messages and photos of her two young children. These digital communications, however, lacked the warmth and familiarity one would expect, raising suspicions among those who knew her best. The investigation took a pivotal turn when authorities traced a vehicle missing from the Ivansic residence to a location in Ohio. There they apprehended 25-year-old Shelby Nealy, also known as Shelby Svensson, Jamie's estranged husband. Nealy was found in possession of the stolen vehicle, along with Jamie's two children, but Jamie herself was nowhere to be found. Under intense interrogation, Nealy confessed to a series of chilling acts. He admitted to murdering his wife, Jamie, in January 2018, burying her body in the yard of their Port Richey home. For nearly a year, he maintained the illusion of her being alive by sending deceptive messages and photos to her family, all while caring for their children. As the facade began to crumble and the Ivansic family grew increasingly suspicious, Nealy made the calculated decision to eliminate them, traveling to their Tarpon Springs home in December 2018 to commit the heinous murders. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community and the nation. How could a man deceive an entire family, maintain such a gruesome charade, and then coldly execute those who had once been his own kin? The case of Shelby Nealy stands as a stark reminder of the depths of human depravity and the fragile nature of trust. In the quiet corridors of justice, the wheels began to turn. Shelby Nealy, the man at the center of a harrowing series of murders, stood before the court, facing the gravity of his actions. The legal system, with its intricate procedures and solemn rituals, prepared to address the crimes that had shocked a community. Nealy was confronted with a litany of charges, each reflecting the severity of his deeds. In the case of his ex-wife, Jamie Avancic, he faced a reduced charge of manslaughter with a weapon, to which he pleaded guilty. This plea resulted in a 30-year prison sentence. For the murders of Jamie's parents, Richard and Laura Avancic, and her brother, Nicholas, Nealy pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder. Additionally, he admitted to 3 counts of aggravated cruelty to animals, acknowledging the brutal killing of the family's 3 dogs. The courtroom was a somber setting as Nealy entered his guilty pleas. His admissions brought a sense of closure to the legal proceedings, yet they also underscored the profound loss experienced by the victim's surviving family members and the community at large. The acknowledgement of his guilt spared the need for a prolonged trial, but it did little to relieve the sorrow caused by his actions. While the plea agreements addressed the charges, the legal process was far from over. A penalty phase was scheduled to determine Nealy's fate concerning the first-degree murder convictions. Set for October 14, 2024, this phase would involve a jury deliberating whether Nealy should face the death penalty or life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As the date approached, the community braced itself for the forthcoming proceedings. The penalty phase promised to be a critical juncture, offering a final resolution to a case that had left an indelible mark on all those affected. The legal journey of Shelby Nealy serves as a stark reminder of the justice system's role in addressing heinous crimes. It underscores the meticulous process through which society seeks to balance accountability, punishment, and the hope for closure in the aftermath of unimaginable tragedy. In the aftermath of the heinous crimes committed by Shelby Nealy, a pressing question emerged. What could drive an individual to such extreme acts against his own family? To comprehend the depths of this tragedy, we must delve into the psychological landscape that may have influenced Nealy's actions. Familicide, the act of killing one's own family members, often stems from complex psychological and situational factors. Research indicates that perpetrators may experience intense feelings of control, possessiveness, and a desire to maintain a facade of familial harmony. Financial distress, relationship breakdowns, and mental health issues are frequently identified as contributing elements. In Nealy's case, the sequence of events suggests a possible fear of exposure and loss of control. After murdering his ex-wife, Jamie Avancic, he maintained the illusion of her being alive by sending deceptive messages to her family. As the likelihood of discovery grew, Nealy may have perceived the Avancic family as obstacles to his constructed reality, leading him to commit further murders to preserve his deception. Dr. Neil Websdale, a criminologist specializing in family violence, notes that perpetrators of familicide are often highly repressed individuals who may be facing significant personal crises, such as financial ruin or relationship dissolution. These individuals might resort to extreme measures to prevent perceived shame or to maintain control over their circumstances. Furthermore, a study published in the Journal of Forensic Psychiatry and Psychology found that a majority of familicide perpetrators were experiencing mental illness at the time of their crimes. The study suggests that increased monitoring of individuals undergoing severe personal crises could have preventative value. In Nealy's situation, his actions align with patterns observed in other cases of familicide, where the perpetrator seeks to eliminate those they perceive as threats to their control or as witnesses to their failures. While specific details of Nealy's mental health have not been publicly disclosed, his calculated efforts to conceal his initial crime and subsequent decision to commit additional murders indicate a deeply disturbed psyche grappling with desperation and a distorted sense of self-preservation. Understanding the psychological underpinnings of such acts is crucial for developing interventions and support systems aimed at preventing future tragedies. It underscores the importance of mental health awareness, early intervention, and the need for societal structures that can identify and assist individuals at risk before they reach a breaking point. The tragic events that unfolded within the Avancic family sent shockwaves through their close-knit community, leaving an indelible mark on all who knew them. The sudden and violent loss of Richard, Laura, and Nicholas Avancic, coupled with the earlier disappearance of Jamie, cast a pall of grief and disbelief over their friends, neighbors, and extended family. The emotional toll on the surviving members of the Ivancic family was profound. Michael Ivancic, Richard's eldest son from a previous marriage, grappled with the devastating loss of his father, stepmother, and half-brother. In a heartfelt interview, he expressed his anguish and the overwhelming sense of loss that enveloped him. The community, too, mourned the deaths of individuals they had come to know and cherish. Neighbors recalled Richard and Laura as friendly and approachable, often seen tending to their garden or engaging in neighborhood events. Nicholas, though more reserved, was remembered for his kindness and willingness to lend a helping hand. The harrowing nature of the crimes attracted significant media attention, both locally and nationally. News outlets provided extensive coverage, detailing the sequence of events and the subsequent investigation. The revelation that Shelby Nealy had impersonated his deceased wife, Jamie, for nearly a year added a chilling layer to the narrative, capturing the public's attention and leading to widespread discussions about the case. The media's portrayal highlighted the brutality of the murders and the calculated deception that followed, painting a picture of a tragedy that resonated deeply with audiences. The community's response was one of collective mourning and support for the surviving family members. Vigils were held to honor the memories of the deceased, and neighbors came together to offer condolences and assistance. The shared grief served as a testament to the strong bonds within the community and their resilience in the face of such an unimaginable tragedy. In the wake of the murders, discussions emerged about the importance of mental health awareness and the need for vigilance in recognizing signs of domestic abuse or psychological distress. The case served as a somber reminder of the potential for hidden turmoil within seemingly ordinary lives and underscored the necessity for communities to foster environments where individuals feel safe to seek help. The impact of the Ivancic family tragedy continues to be felt, serving as a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of community solidarity in times of profound loss. It was a crime that shattered lives, a series of betrayals so profound that it left an entire community reeling. A family brutally torn apart. A man hiding behind deception, manipulating reality to mask the horrors he had inflicted. And in the end, justice, though swift, could never truly undo the devastation left in its wake. The story of Shelby Nealy and the Ivancic family is more than just a tale of murder. It is a grim reminder of the hidden dangers that can lurk behind the most familiar faces. What can we learn from this tragedy? How can we protect those we love from the darkness that sometimes hides in plain sight? The events that unfolded within the Ivancic family serve as a harrowing reminder of the importance of awareness and vigilance when it comes to domestic violence and psychological manipulation. The warning signs, no matter how subtle, are often there, lingering just beneath the surface. Isolation, sudden changes in behavior, and overwhelming sense of control, these can all be indicators of a dangerous and potentially deadly situation. In Jamie Ivancic's case, the true extent of her suffering may never be fully understood. But what is clear is that she lived under the control of a man willing to go to unthinkable lengths to maintain his power. Domestic violence is not always visible. It is not always loud. Sometimes, it operates in the shadows, hidden behind smiles and carefully crafted lies. This case underscores the importance of maintaining connections with loved ones, of paying attention when someone withdraws, of asking questions when something doesn't feel right. It is a tragic example of what can happen when a controlling individual is given unchecked power over someone else's life. And then there's the deception. For nearly a year, Shelby Nealy maintained the illusion that Jamie was still alive, sending messages, keeping up appearances. The fact that her family accepted those messages at face value, because they had no reason to doubt, shows how easily technology can be manipulated to maintain control even after a crime has been committed. It's a sobering reality in a digital age, where a simple text message can be enough to push away suspicion, even when something is terribly wrong. The Ivancic family should still be here. Richard and Laura, loving parents who had no reason to suspect the horror that awaited them. Nicholas, a young man with his whole life ahead of him. And Jamie, a mother whose life was stolen long before the truth ever came to light. Their story is not just one of tragedy, but one that should force us to confront uncomfortable truths about human behavior, manipulation, and violence. Justice in the legal sense has been served, but the pain left behind is immeasurable. Those who loved the Ivancic family will carry this grief forever, forced to reconcile the memories of happier times with the reality of how it all ended. And while the case has faded from headlines, its impact lingers in the lives of those who were left behind. True crime stories like this one serve as a mirror, forcing us to examine the complexities of human behavior, the gaps in our justice system, and the ways in which manipulation and control can escalate into something far worse. They force us to ask difficult questions. Could this have been prevented? Were there signs? What would we have done in their place? And perhaps most chilling of all, how many other cases like this are unfolding right now, hidden behind closed doors? The reality is that tragedies like this don't happen in isolation. Domestic violence, coercive control, and psychological manipulation are more common than most people realize. This case is a reminder that intervention can be the difference between life and death. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, reach out. There are resources. There are people who can help. Silence should never be an option. What are your thoughts on this case? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this deep dive into the Ivancic family tragedy compelling, be sure to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel for more true crime stories. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we uncover another chilling case of betrayal and murder. One that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about trust, deception, and the human mind. You won't want to miss it.